All right. Welcome back, everybody, to another Learning Tech Talks, where we continue living at the intersection of business, technology, and experience. Today, I'm joined by Peter Schroeder, and we're going to be taking an interesting angle today on two different areas. So, first of all, one, I was really fascinated to hear how technology is really focused in on the communication side of things and how it's unifying communications. But in the AI age, I think communication is paramount. And so how we do it and the different ways we do it is going to be critical. So hopefully you'll get a chance to peek into the looking glass into where that's going. But the other part of this, as Peter and I were talking about his background and some of the interesting intersections we found in the tech sector, is tech is not just for tech heads, that stereotypical technical person that you think of when you go, oh, that's the person who's doing this technical stuff. It's actually some of the most fascinating, creative people I've encountered. So we're gonna blow that myth out of the water. So thank you so much, Peter, for joining me. And we got all the tech bugs worked out, which required creativity. So there you go.
It really did. I got a little sweaty right there for a second. Thank you so much for having me. This is I'm really excited about this.
Yeah, no, I know it's going to be a good time, and we will have no issues filling the time. I have no doubt there. So for folks who may not be as familiar with you, I got the chance to get to know you, which I have to say, Peter, I was a little disappointed that your background did not have the OG Mac in it, but you know what? It's okay. It's okay. You got a fancy studio, so this is a better setup, I suppose.
Yeah. But I do like that one though. It's I'm becoming a collector. I think it's like an old man's thing, right? I'm almost 40, so now you're starting to collect all these old memorabilia, and I guess this Mac.
I know.
Old Mac is
the things that, like, when you have kids, or if you have kids, your kids look at it and go, "What is that?" As though it's a dinosaur bone or something like that. I've had a few things that I've pulled out of storage before that my kids have looked at and gone, what do you do with that? Like a floppy disk. They're just absolutely, their mind is absolutely blown by like a 3.5-inch floppy, as though it's just a foreign concept.
Yeah, and then tell them how much data you can fit on it.
Yeah, right. You probably couldn't even save one of your iPhone pictures on this anymore. It wouldn't even hold it. No, but for folks who don't know you, little bit of background, because you don't have, again, like I said, challenging this assumption that tech heads all fit this typical stereotype. They don't. You didn't grow up. I mean, that was not your aspiration to get into tech and telecommunications, was it?
Well, so I've always been a nerd. Let's just
That's fine. Like, that's fine. I've never fit in anywhere. So
yeah. It's I'm definitely a nerd and computer geek too. Like I've coded my whole life, but my grandfather was a telephone technician, so that probably also has an influence in like just how I was curious about. I've always have this fascination about telecom and communications, that kind of stuff. But besides that, yeah, I grew up with creative parents. My mom was a pianist, my dad was a drummer, and he was out on gigs all weekends, and definitely have a creative side to me. Later on, became a musician myself.
Wait, though. So and you're going to find I interrupt a lot. It's just part of my flow. So your mom and dad, your mom was a pianist, your dad was a drummer. Like they did that? That was their profession? So were they traveling doing that, or more hobby?
Well, so my mom could have done that. The story is when she was 16, she was invited to play with the local symphony orchestra in her hometown or a nearby town. Literally like the job that people wait their whole life to get, like a paid gig. And my grandfather was, no, you need to get a real education. So she went out and became an engineer instead. She never did it for a living.
Wow, that's like quite a shift. Like, well, you could have gone the symphony orchestra route, but instead engineering. That's not necessarily the pathway I would have automatically jumped to.
No, exactly. And but like it's very similar to me too. I have had this like very engineering side to me, and then at the same time, creative musician. But it's funny you say that some of the most talented developers out there I know are all creative people. Like you have to be super creative to code, and that's just what it is. It's not those ones that sit in a basement locked in and only can say numbers and all that. Absolutely not. It's really just they're all really creative, and
it's a different way of problem solving. It really is. I mean, it's a creative problem solving. It's just you're doing it with numbers on a machine instead of through a different medium.
100%. And the thing is, like, yeah, there are developers out there that are, just mathematicians, and either they write encryption algorithms, or they work for an outsourcing company somewhere and are not allowed to be creative and think self. They just have to
Yeah.
write the code that they're told to write,
Yep.
and no input. And that's never good. That's never gonna be a good. Like, how have you ever been successful in anything outsourcing to people that are not allowed to be creative themselves? It
Yeah.
just doesn't work.
Okay. Okay. All right. So mom, pianist, could have gone
Mm-hmm.
pro, paid gig, like a creative's dream.
Yeah.
Like the thing I love doing. I could then went engineering. Dad, drummer.
Yeah.
So same kind of story or what?
No, so he was more on hobby. Well, not really, because they're out every weekend. His band
Okay.
playing
See,
all
that's
over
more than a
countries. And
hobby. If you're out
yeah,
actually playing and doing
right.
gigs, that's not
But
just like,
he
yeah, I've got a
he had a
drum
job.
set in the basement. He had a job
Exactly.
too.
Yeah,
Okay.
yeah, yeah, yeah. So I grew up with them, and with just like having this music background, this very influential to my whole life. And at the same time, they gave me a computer when I was 6. I was super lucky to have parents that really just supported my nerdiness.
Okay.
And that just sparked this thing. I never want to play video games or anything like that. I just started figuring out what's going on behind the scenes. Like, how's this thing actually working?
Okay.
And when I was
So you didn't
14, I
even
ended
care
up.
about the front end of it. It was more like, yeah, but
No,
how's it actually work on the back
yeah,
end?
exactly. What's going on? Like, why is how's this game actually loading? And who made that game? And I wanted to like figure that out. Like there's a game, so someone must have made it, and how did they do that? That was really
Yeah.
more interesting to me.
How did my Oregon Trail character die of dysentery again?
Yes, that's a good
Again, like
reference.
what happened? I could just swore I had a better path
Yeah.
charted.
Who decided that? And how did they decide that, right?
Yeah.
Someone must have.
Okay. Okay. But
Mhm.
your grandpa had the telecom background.
Yeah, yeah. Well, so
Okay.
he was an old school telecom technician, the ones that were out in the trenches and pulling the wires, and he retired right when the digital age kind of started.
Okay.
So sometime in the late '80s, I would say, and and things started digitizing. That was just when he just like pulled the plug because he was old school that way, like he had been
Okay.
trained and he'd like worked his whole life with that. But what's cool
Yeah,
was
he's like, this whole thing's getting disrupted and I'm just not
yeah,
on for the ride. Like I'm just
exactly.
gonna kind of let the next generation carry that forward.
Yeah, exactly.
I
And
get it.
that's the age, and at some point you say, okay, this is now, and I'm not gonna be on for this.
Yeah.
So yeah, that's just what it is. He my whole childhood brought home old telexes and old machines from that he pulled from places where they weren't being used anymore, that I could take apart and try and make work and stuff. So that was just like always this fascination for a physical phone ringing when you're doing something. There's just like something
Yeah.
to it, and that you can talk to someone somewhere else. It's really cool.
Yeah. And it's something that I feel like the younger generations, I mean, even my kids, I've shown them, we don't have an actual physical phone in our house, but I've shown them like videos of it and they just look at it as though it's just fast, like magical. Like you used to have to push physical buttons, like the buttons actually did a thing and there was a handset that you did, and
Yeah,
it's very
and then you had to
foreign,
hope
but
the other one was home, right?
right.
Like,
Right. Like this idea of like, what, you couldn't just like text them if they didn't answer? Like, no, you
yeah,
couldn't. You
yeah.
waited.
And then what?
You
Like, yeah,
waited.
and or you waited at home for them to call you.
Right.
That was also a thing.
Yeah.
Yeah,
Okay,
that has
but
always
you
been
didn't go straight into that. That's not where
no.
you started your career. You took it on the music track.
Well, so if you really want to back down, like that, back to the beginning, then I started doing radio for DR, Denmark's radio, the national, basically the BBC of Denmark,
Okay.
And was a radio reporter for a kids show when I was 9,
A
10.
radio reporter for a kids show?
Yeah, like a national radio show, national radio, and then from there on, I went on to do national TV, the same for the same network, and
Okay.
basically the same position until my voice started changing when I was like 12, 13ish. So then I had to
Oh,
figure
you
something else
legit did
out.
it as a kid. You were like a
Yeah, yeah,
kid
yeah,
reporter,
kid
not
reporter,
just
right?
like an adult reporting on kid stuff.
No, the other way around. Yeah, so
Oh,
this is like
wow.
a kid
Okay.
show. Every afternoon at 3 p.m. I think it was, that show was on, and yeah, and then they started that same show as a TV show, and I moved with that and was there for a little bit. Yeah. So I
Okay.
was traveling
Okay.
around just with the camera and reporting and interviewing other kids.
Okay. So communication was in your blood going all
Yeah,
the way back.
yeah, and media and entertainment and all that stuff. Yeah, it's always been
Okay.
interesting to me. And then when
Okay.
I was 14, I launched my first website because, hey, I couldn't do the other thing anymore. My voice had changed. I wasn't puberty and all that. So I need to figure something else out. And some of my friends
Yeah.
had, were good at drawing. And that wasn't really something I was good at, but I just seen this new thing, internet. And hey, you should put your art online because that's what you do now. So I made a website where they could do that. And all of a sudden, other people started submitting their art. And all of a sudden, I had Scandinavia's biggest artist community for artists.
Really? So something you just started is like, hey, my friends have this stuff. They don't really have a place to put it. I'll just make a place, grew into
Yeah,
something
thousands of users. Yeah, and
that's
that was
insane.
the early days of the internet. But
That
there's
was the early days.
yeah, it was interesting because there's not anything out there like that, and eventually some other company came around and made a similar community, and they bought my site when I was I think 18 or something like that. There was like an international version of it,
Okay.
but yeah, that was just that was interesting.
So you didn't. So on this one, because again, I mean, you started your telecom company too, and you've done. I will get into your kind of music background, but did you have aspirations to do the entrepreneurial thing? Like, was
I
that a
think
plan, or did it just kind of happen? You just did what
yeah.
you creatively were doing, and then all of a sudden it was like somebody went, "Hey, like that's a company."
Yeah, I think so. I've never thought of me as an entrepreneur until I moved to the US and heard it on Shark Tank. you know, I was like, I never thought
Oh,
of that
that's what
as a
it's
title.
called.
Yeah, exactly. I was like, I'm just doing whatever I think is fun, and sometimes it happens to make some money, and I can start a company, and we can do that. But it's really just about having fun with what you do.
Okay. Okay. All right. So good grief. We didn't even get into all this in the pre-show. So child news TV, icon. And then you got into internet website builder in the early days of the internet, which for anybody who was not around in those days, that was a very different time on the
Oh yeah.
internet. I can tell you that. It was a very different time. But then was it then after that that you got into the music scene?
Yeah, so when I was 18-ish, 17, 18, I started DJing at nightclubs. In Denmark, you can get in when you're 18. So before that, I had been already DJing at my friends' parties. I was very into that, but now all of a sudden I could actually go to a legit club and get a job. So I started
Okay.
playing more and more, and
So
that's
same
when
kind of trajectory. You just liked
yeah,
doing it. You were
yeah.
doing it, and then it turned out, hey, this could be a thing.
Yeah, I love doing it, and I had seen, I think already in third grade I saw a DJ at a school party, and I was like, this is cool how he can play a song and people go bonkers and they having a good time just by him like playing some music. That's awesome. I remember that very vividly that time. So I was like, I need to do that. I like hosting people. I like having people over for dinner, and like I like the feeling that you give people when they, when you give them a good time, right? So
Yeah.
that was just like very natural to me, and I started doing that, and eventually, very small stepping stones. It's never been, the big goals for me. It's just like been one little thing at a time. So eventually, I
Okay.
got to a larger club and a bigger city and bigger clubs, and I started a band, and we released music. I started actually making music
Okay.
because a nerd and computers, and you can sit in front of your computer and make music all of a sudden. That was awesome. So I met some guys online actually, and we started a band, and all of a sudden we had a record deal, and we were on tour in Germany.
That's so well. And in terms of the music piece, because this also gives me some further insight into your kind of the way your mind works on this. But electronic music, like, so were you, because I'm thinking your dad, drummer, mom,
Mm-hmm.
piano. Were you digital music? Was your style, your genre, were you doing more digital music? So you were kind of merging the music genre with technology?
Yeah, totally. I mean, growing up in Europe in the 90s, how there was only digital
Yeah, that's
music. Eurotanz.
yeah, that's kind of where that kind of was a big thing then. Okay,
Yeah.
still is, but okay,
Yeah,
got it.
exactly. So no, but yeah, it was definitely electronic music. Later on, I made other things as well, and actually the things I sold the most of was pop and hip hop and different other things. But it was definitely mostly electronic, and what our first band did was dance music. And yeah, so we got a couple of guys together, and we made a band, and all of a sudden we had this deal, and eventually I was like, okay, I'm seeing what the record label is doing for us, and I can do that. So I started a record label to do that instead and make the money myself, because why giving someone else when you can do it?
Right, you've got somebody else who's taken a big chunk of it, and you
Mm-hmm.
figured you deconstruct it again. It's giving me insight into the way your brain works, which is you see these things, you go, well, let me deconstruct this thing. And
Yeah,
you go, I could
exactly.
reconstruct that myself. So why would I have somebody else do it? And so then you had a record label.
Yeah, so I started a record label, and obviously signed my own band to begin with, and that was really just the idea to release our own stuff. But I had other friends in
Okay.
the industry and
Kind of like
started
somebody that
signing
gets
them.
their real estate license so that they can buy
Yeah,
and sell their own house type of a thing.
kind of thing. Yeah, exactly.
Kind
And,
of.
and I would be more in control, and be able to do it the way I thought it should be done. Promotion wise, and releasing things. And eventually, I started signing some of my friends, and getting their music out as well. And that went cool, but it was at the a really bad period of time in the music industry. It was right after Napster had just basically cracked, and
Oh,
before Spotify had started, and it was like where the internet, the internet hadn't really figured out what to do with music legally, and the music industry didn't know what to do. They were just like running around in circles. So didn't make much money off of it, but eventually sold that whole thing to Sony.
okay.
When I kind of realized that I was maybe in over my head in terms of just too much on my plate.
Having your own record label was just more than you wanted to get into.
Yeah, and being an artist on the side, I was still in my band. I was still a solo artist. I was still producing and writing songs and all these things. And this was before I found out that I have absolutely raging ADD. That was not something. That was not a thing in the 90s when I grew up. That was or the 80s. That was just like you just heard about ADHD, and the kids running backwards up the walls and can't sit still. And I'm not like that. I'm just I'm actually pretty chill. I'm very focused on things that I'm interested in. And I was told this my whole childhood. Yeah,
Okay.
he's very smart, but he's not good at focusing on things he's not interested in. So that's apparently
Yeah.
that's called ADD. And one of the other things about that is really you're not getting obviously things done you're not interested in, but also you want to do everything you are interested in. So
Yeah.
you say yes
You
to
want to pursue it
everything you
all.
can. Yeah, and that was before I had that insight into my brain and understanding how that works. So I had absolutely said yes to too much, and I was burning bridges. And eventually, my old booking agent, she pulled me aside and said, "Hey, Peter, we need to fix this." And she arranged that I could sell my stuff, and I actually moved back on my mom's couch for a couple of weeks, I think, back then, and basically just did a full reset.
So it's interesting you bring that up because I think that is, and I agree that I think this is something you see in, I've known a lot of folks and probably myself, I've dabble in some of these things anyway, but this whole idea of trying to be everything
Yeah,
to everyone and trying to do it all ends up leaving you in a place where you're not really doing anything all that well because you're just spread too thin. And even if you technically could do it, you just don't have the capacity to be able to actually zone in and really drill in.
absolutely. And it's a funny thing because you keep saying to yourself, I can do this for that person. I want to do it for this person. I'm going to help them. I can do it so well at whatever it is that they're asking me, or maybe they're not even asking. They're.
But I just
I
see
just know
it.
I see it and I can help and I want to help them because I like helping other people. I'm a people pleaser, right? The
Yeah.
problem is when you do that and you then don't follow through and yeah, it gets overwhelming, or for some other reason you're not pulling through on that one. Then it's 10 times worse than if you just said no in the beginning or hadn't offered
Right.
anything.
Yeah.
You're burning your bridges, you're losing friendships, and it's just horrible. And I went through that, and that was absolutely not a fun period of my time of my life.
Okay. Okay. But so you had a cosmic reset then. So you
Hmm.
step back, kind of had your moment where you went, all right, enough is enough,
Hmm.
type, which some people never hit that.
Right.
So I guess in some ways it's a good thing you did, or I mean, it's a positive. It probably didn't
Oh,
feel like a positive in that moment. But like looking
Yeah.
back, you're like, thank goodness, because some people go through their whole lives like that.
Yeah. No, it was absolutely amazing that she stepped in at that time. I thank her so much for that because it's I probably wouldn't have done it myself. I would just have kept trucking until everything was lost. And she stepped in and said, "Hey, let's figure this out." That was
Okay.
absolutely cool. Yeah.
Okay. So where did that, is that when what you did, the steps you took towards your telecom journey, is that where kind of that pivot moment, or what happened coming out of that?
Um, well, so sort of. After that, like I said, I moved back, reset, and I figured out what to do next. I ended up getting a job as a first line tech supporter for a little bit. I was in that job for 2 weeks, I think, and then I got a promotion to be an integrator because I couldn't help making tools for myself to make it life easier for myself to actually do my tech support job, and they I guess liked that, and I ended up making these ones for a while. Unfortunately, that company went bankrupt during the 2008 crash, and uh, and then from there on, I actually went to work for Denmark's Radio again, the company or the broadcast corporation that I worked for
Okay.
when I was a kid, and I did IT out there or coded for them for a little bit, and that's actually where I met one of the guys that is with my company today, one of the co-founders,
Okay.
Jonas, who's a big part
So with
of
the
Personalization
coding
too.
piece, because so had that just always been kind of an underlying, you were a technical problem solver, so you'd kept those skills, that kind of ability somewhat fresh where you were kind of putting this together? Because it sounds like even from the job front, you came out of, came out of the funk and went
Hmm.
back to work, and then kind of went, you know what, I'm going to solve some of these problems, still using some of those technical skills.
Yeah, exactly. And even when I had my label, I was still writing the software to keep track of the releases and promotion and royalties and all these kind of things.
Okay.
I'm very much into automation. Everything that I can automate, I would rather do than manage
Efficiency.
someone to do it. Yeah, well, it's also because I don't like managing people. I really, really don't like it. One thing is I don't like telling people what to do, but I hate even more following up on it and making sure they do it. That's just like,
Okay.
yeah, I don't know what it is, but I'm not good at that. So the fewer people I can have in my company, the better. And you'll
Okay.
see Telzio is like compared to how many customers we have, and if you compare it to our competitors, we have almost no employees.
Okay.
Everything is really automated. So I'm very much into that. And yeah, like I worked for DR for I don't know three years maybe, while still producing and DJing. I got bigger and bigger gigs at that point, and eventually I started producing some really big names, A-lists in Denmark, and was on tour with them. And I put like myself, my own DJ name became bigger too because of that. Got boosted, and then in 2011 and 12, within a 1 year period, I played 383 gigs, I think it is. And that just burned me out completely. That was just I wasn't that fun.
See,
I
what's
lost
funny
fun.
about your journey is here, I thought the music piece was behind you, but really it was in some ways just getting started.
Yeah, oh yeah, exactly. Yeah. I had only scratched the surface at that point. All of a sudden, I
Okay.
started playing in the U.S. and EDM had just become a term. It was just what they
Yeah.
call dance music, but in the U.S. you had all of a sudden EDM, and I started playing in Vegas because there was these big clubs and people wanted that genre, and I had that skill of playing and knowing that most American DJs don't have because I kind of
Yeah.
grew up with that, right? So I got a lot of gigs there, and I actually met my wife on one of the gigs out there in 2012, and as I met her actually on that last trip, that's also where I decided to call the same booking agent again and say, hey, Christina, can you put a pause on my gigs for a little bit? I'm burned out. I need to also
Oh, so
make
this
new
time
music.
you
And
talked, you told,
I did.
directed it to her. You were like, you know what? I remember
Hey, I
what you
learned.
told me last time. I feel like I might be on that same treadmill.
Yeah,
Time to put me on pause.
it totally was. And I knew that I also had to make new music because I'm not like a lot of my old colleagues. They can make music on a laptop in a on a plane wherever they are. But probably because of my ADD, I can't do that. I have to be in my studio, everything neatly set up, everything plugged in perfectly before I can focus.
Okay.
And I hadn't been able to do that for a year. So I had no new music, no nothing, and you have to keep yourself relevant. So
Fresh.
Ask her, yeah, exactly. And so I took a break, and while I was doing that, I was tinkling with another IT thing. I had an idea for a platform, or like a promotion platform that I was coding on, and I needed a phone system for that, like a support line, something that would just take
So
people's
you thought, I
calls.
guess I'll just build one.
Yeah, because there wasn't one, right? And that's how Telzio started. Yeah, yeah. I
Okay.
mean,
Okay.
it really was. Yeah, I couldn't find anything out of the box that I could afford that was easy to manage. So I set something up, and I wanted something that was easier to manage myself. So I started making a little interface for it, and that was so much fun. I've really enjoyed myself more than I had for years. So I just kept coding on that, and all of a sudden, I had built kind of a minimum viable product, and
So when you talk about
yeah.
this, because I think for folks who listen or watch this afterwards, as we talk about, and hopefully, if anything, as people think about this, you know, what I love about unpacking your journey is the fact that there is this idea that, technology looks one way, or I see a lot of it right now in my industry and just in industry in general. There's this almost fear of technology of like, well, what do we do? How do we get back to the way it used to be? And it's like, well, you
That's
don't,
not happening.
but that's not happening. But
Yeah.
there's a beauty in that. And there's
Mhm.
something that you can create out of it that's actually better than what was there before, but you have to embrace it. And I think what you did that maybe others may be less comfortable with was it was just like, well, I'm just going to embrace it
Yeah.
versus I'm going to wait until I have no choice because if I don't, I'm going to go the way of the dinosaurs.
Yeah, it's interesting. Like, I think it's actually becoming my motto now. It's like everything is always changing. You can't prevent things from changing, and you can either adapt or you can be forced to adapt.
Yeah.
That's really it. And like the whole thing with AI happening, and people being afraid of that. Yeah, it's scary, but you can't prevent it.
It's an
There's no reason.
inevitability. That's
It is.
basically what I've said. It's an inevitability. You're not
Yeah.
going to avoid it. So you can either adapt to the change or have the change handed to you.
Yeah, exactly. And then it will be a lot easier for you if you adapt and join right
Well,
now.
you have a little more autonomy and say in where it's going if you
Yeah.
adapt versus if you wait till someone else frames it, which I think of your telecom, which we'll get into, you saw the opportunity. You
Mhm.
could have said, well, this just sucks. So I'll put up with a crappy way of doing it. Someone else would have figured it out. And then you would have had to deal with what they did, which
Mhm.
probably wouldn't have been exactly what you wanted. But because you leaned in and went, hey, I think I know how to do this,
Yeah.
you could build it the way you wanted it.
Yeah, and if you look at our platform today, what we built with Telzio is everything is built in house, literally down to the last little nut and bolt. I would say, like, it's very very few services that we are buying from third parties. I think the only thing is really our CRM. Besides that, everything is built in house, the whole platform, and it's really just because, well, yeah, we can build it ourselves. We have the ability to do it, and those things. But it's also this thing about being independent and being able to fix things when things go wrong, and also be able to shape it the way you want it, and have it exactly the way you think it should be. That's also one of the reasons why we haven't taken VC investors or anything like that. It's there's just something about that, and to me, it's not about making a lot of money. That's nice that follows. I'm not against making money, not at all.
Yeah.
I definitely like that, but it's not about that. It's really about being able to play around with the things that I enjoy playing around with, and be able to not be told what to do every single day.
Well, and I think that is the essence of why I think it's so important in times of big disruption like this to lean into those changes. Because to your point,
Mhm.
it's going to come for you one way or the other, but you have a lot more creative freedom in defining that future path if you embrace it than you do if you wait back for things to happen.
I mean, it's like back in the days, there were saddle makers, right? And they were making saddles, and they were always going to have a job because there's always going to be saddles for people to buy. There's always going to be a need for that. But then came the car, and the saddle makers who adapted and started making upholstery, they were very successful. But the ones that said, no, we're going to keep doing what we're always doing, they were out of a job. All of a sudden, there was no
Well,
jobs
and
for
the thing
salesmen.
that's interesting about that I run into every once in a while, because I do run into some folks who are like, I just am dead set on upholding the whatever it was, saddle maker, whatever that thing may be. And I look at it and I go, you know what? There may be room for that. There might.
Yeah.
At some point, people still have horses and they still buy saddles. However, you better be the absolute best in the business at doing whatever that handcrafted thing is, because someone else is going to make them cheaper, faster, better. So if you might be able to carve that niche out, but I find a lot of people don't really have the passion and the drive to be the best in that. And it's like, well, but if you're not, then you need to find that creative avenue to do things differently, because otherwise it is going to be that much harder for you. It's just a different road.
Spot on. It's spot on. Yeah. It's difficult, right? And it's, as humans, it is hard to change, and it's hard to wrap your head around doing other things, and it is for me too. It's not like I have this God-sent ability to just adapt and be like, not at all. Everyone has their own ways and their own minds. And like I said before, I love the freedom and being able to do what I want. There's the whole thing in that, right? But I think sometimes something comes around and that you just need to adapt to. And AI being one of them, I think personally that is bigger than the internet was when that came around in the 90s.
It's bigger than the Industrial Revolution. I mean, this is going to change. It's going to change a lot. Everything. I think I did one episode where I literally named it "It's the End of the World as We Know It," going back to good old REM. And it's like, but I feel fine, because the reality is, if you embrace the inevitability, you will be fine. If you don't, well, it's a different story.
But then there's also this whole thing to it. Is can you do anything about it? Well,
no.
Then don't worry about it.
Right.
And if you can do something about it, then go do something about it and don't worry about it. Like that's really how my brain works and how I live my life. My wife says that you can't do that. Not everyone can just turn their don't worry feature off and go do. But I'm able to do that. I can literally tell myself, hey, I there's no need to worry. No matter what, I can either do something about it or I can't do anything about it. And then if I can't do anything about it, then there's no reason to worry about it. Then I just need to go with the flow.
Well, and I think to your point with this, it's not necessarily dismissing the hardship that comes with that. No. I have a lot of conversations with people about some of the uncertainty of the future and some of the things, and the reality that, I mean, a lot of people who thought their jobs were 100% secure. I mean, lawyers, doctors, certain roles where it was like, well, that's never going to get disrupted. And it's like, I don't know. They're writing AI algorithms that can vastly diagnose diseases 1,000 times faster and more accurate than you can. Yeah. And that can be very frightening. And I don't think it's just dismissing it as though that doesn't matter and going, oh, it's no big deal, I'll just move on. But being able to say, yeah, that does really suck. But to your point, I can't change it. Yeah. So what am I going to do about it? Exactly. So that you actually can put one foot in front of the other and chart a path forward. Because one of the things I've experienced is no matter what you do, there is a path forward. And I think your career kind of backstory is a perfect example of like, well, that didn't go quite according to plan.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
Sucks. But you move on.
Exactly. That's exactly what it is. And I was gonna say, like, it's really rare that you get to the point where is there nothing you can do about it. There's always something you can do. You always have a choice to do something, no matter what it is.
Even if it's just your attitude.
Exactly. Exactly. It's interesting how that works, but because I'm afraid too. I just became a dad 20 months ago, right? So I have kids that are gonna grow up in a very different world than I grew up in, and I'm worried about, like, just today or right now, just the past year, with the wars all of a sudden happening all over the world, and there's so many different things that are different that I can't do anything about, like, at least from a macro point of view. But you know what? There's no reason to worry about it, because it is what it is, and I just need to go with that, and I'm gonna have a choice, whatever is in front of me. And we'll have to take that, and so will my kids. And the same thing with the AI. I definitely know that coding. I mean, I'm writing software with Copilot from GitHub right now, and it's really good.
I know.
And I mean, it's definitely making my life easier. And I'm actually enjoying seeing it come up with writing code the way I wanted to write it in my style. So that just also tells me that within a couple of years, that's going to be a lot more advanced than it is now. And am I going to be a software developer the rest of my life? No, probably not. I
No.
also have on my bucket list that I need to own a hot dog stand at some point. So, and then I'll go do that if there's no vending machine at that point.
Well, but I think, as I think about what you're talking about and really what this looks like, I mean, there's a lot of the uncertainty. I mean, I'm a dad of 7, right? There's a
Right.
lot of these things. I don't have the answers to some of the things. I get asked all the time, well, like, what do you think is going to happen with jobs and this and that? And I'm like, I can make some predictions. I can make some assumptions based on some of the things I'm saying. But quite frankly, I don't think any of us knew that 2023 was going to bring what 2023 brought. Heck,
No.
2020 didn't brought a whole sea of things that we never anticipated were going to come. So I think it is one of those things where it doesn't mean you just throw things out, the baby out with the bathwater, and say, the heck with it. I'm not going to do anything or plan for anything. But it also means you also don't lose sleep over it and worry about the things that are outside of your control. I think back to, I don't know if you ever read the book of Ecclesiastes, but like that book is filled with these kinds of things about the fact that it's like, control what you can control. And in some ways, I feel like the internet has actually made that harder for people to see, because they're seeing so much stuff and taking so much stuff in that is so far outside of their control. Mm-hmm. It can almost make you feel like you're helpless versus going, right, but what is in your direct span of control?
Exactly. And that's the thing. That itself, by the way, is scary. How kids are essentially exposed to that from the beginning. But again, everything's always changing, and you can be mad about that, or you can say, okay, I can't change that. That's just the world we live in now. And back in the days, there were you'd have to go out and fight a lion to get food. That's. Things are just changing, and you have to go with that. I really think it's that simple. And like I said, if you can do something about it, go do something about it. Don't sit and be worried or cry or something. Like you're allowed to, of course, have a moment and
sure.
Be emotional and all that stuff. But come on, pull yourself together and do something about it.
Well, and I had a gentleman on my show, Kevin Suris. And he is the gentleman who, he and his teams were the ones who created the technology underneath Alexa, Siri, and all that. And we were talking about the fact that, we were similar conversation in the same vein. But one of the comments he made that still sticks with me that made me laugh was, he's like, at one point in human history, there were people carrying things on their back, and someone created a wheel and walked by them with the wheel, and everyone with the stuff on their back went, oh my gosh, like, oh, this is the end. Like, what's going to happen? What, my whole life is built around carrying things on my back. This guy over here just invented the wheel. The whole world is going to go down with it. And it's like, and now we don't think anything of it because we've evolved and we've adapted to our environment, and we figure out a way forward through it. But in that moment, those people legitimately were terrified for good reasons. Their whole life and identity had been built on carrying things on their back. And in an instant, their identity vaporized.
Spot on. And I it's interesting because I always, I'm not a religious guy and I'm not spiritual, but I have this thing in the back of my mind that we don't know anything what's going on. There's just like, it would be arrogant to say that we already figured everything out and science is the answer. Like, okay,
no,
maybe, but it's yeah. We like imagine there's a little ant sitting on a leaf, right?
That's what every generation has thought through all of human history. That like we figured it out, and then the next generation comes through and goes, "You didn't know anything about anything, and we figured it." And we just keep discovering the infinite complexity behind existence.
And that's what it is. And maybe we are not even physical humans in 1,000 years, like we don't know anything. So just go with it. Yeah.
Yeah. So with this, and Well, I'm thinking how to transition because I am curious on this phone thing, and then I want to actually talk about the identity piece.
Yep.
But so what was it about telecom? Because I do think it's interesting. We talked a little bit about the journey of like the internet and how that changed. Similarly, you look at telecom and things have changed and started and stopped. I think back to when I was a kid, when everyone had a landline and you took phone calls, and that was just the way. And even that was modern technology compared to the early days of switchboards and all this other stuff. And then it was mobile phones. And then, so you're at this stage. What was it in your business ventures that you went, telecom's not meeting the need?
Well, so when I started out, there wasn't really anything that was just easy to sign up online when you needed a business phone system. Like you have a company and you need a phone number, you need menus, so people call in, press one for that, press two and queues, please hold, and all that, transferring
Okay.
around. And there wasn't like anything just that was just nice out of the box, and you don't have to install anything. You don't have to just like give me a
Which would
cost,
be a big
cost
problem,
center.
I can imagine, especially for a smaller company where you're not some massive organization where you've got all the infrastructure and all the stuff you're trying to. It's like I'm a newer business or a smaller business trying to figure this out, and
Yeah.
I don't
Yep.
need all this bureaucratic infrastructure.
Exactly, and then at the same time, I was in Denmark at that point, so I needed something where I could get a U.S. number. So that was also an interesting thing, And there was just this whole, yeah, I just felt there was a need for something that was easy out of the box, and at the same time affordable because yeah, I didn't have any money when we started Telzio. My wife cashed in her 401k, and we had what $14,000, $16,000 or something like that, and that's literally where we said, okay, yeah, we're gonna compete against AT&T with
We either
sixteen thousand
have to make
dollars.
this work or we're in big trouble.
Yeah, spot on. Like we were literally like $16,000, and we thought we could compete with AT&T or Verizon, right? It makes no sense, but we were a little naive, or at least I was, and very stubborn, and went out to do it. But I think, yeah, there was just like I saw the margins. I saw, that there's actually a business here. This makes sense to do, and at the same time, it was really fun to build. So we just like, okay, let's go for it, and we built a very small, very few
Now,
features
was
to
this
begin
in
with.
the early days of voice over IP? Was this because
Yes.
I think legacy wise, it was difficult to do some of this stuff?
Yeah, so it was almost say in the middle. It was now we're in 2013, and we'd already had VoIP for maybe decade or something like that. Skype had
Okay.
been out and became a
Yeah.
term and like a verb, but there wasn't really. It was still something like you had to install on servers, and there were a couple of cloud companies out there, but they weren't really online user interface ish and just do everything yourself kind of stuff. So it was kind of early stages of what you see cloud VoIP is today. Um,
Okay.
yeah, and so we built a couple of features, and people. I think we posted it on a couple of message boards online, and people actually started signing up, and as we kind of got customers, they asked for more features, and we added them, and all of a sudden we got bigger customers, and then I had this whole thing, probably in my Danish blood is this whole solidarity thing. Is I didn't want things to be different for a startup with 2 employees. We were a startup with 2 employees ourselves at that point, but no, not be different from a startup to an enterprise. So I wanted it to
Okay.
be fair, and for that reason we kind of kept this whole philosophy from day one and until now, where you get all the features from day one. Like literally, you get the same features, the same everything as an enterprise does, and you just pay for the minutes and the text messages. So the bigger your business is, the more you send and call. So the more you pay, but you're paying the same rates, and you're paying the same as them, and you're getting the same. So you are on the same
So
playing
kind of
field as the big
rejecting
one.
this idea, which I do think is very common, where it's like, well, we treat individuals different than we do teams, than we do like big business. And as
Mm-hmm.
a corporation, you just at some point have to accept that this is just the way you run business. And you kind of went, no, I don't think so.
Yeah. I mean, but think about it. Like, do you pay for electricity or water per user in your company? No, you
No,
don't. You pay for
no.
what you use.
Yeah.
It's just a really, really good that whole per user and you can call as much as unlimited. That's just a really good way to make money for those other companies. And
Yeah.
we could probably have made a lot more money and grew faster if we had done that too. But it just goes against everything in me. I don't think it's fair. I think everyone should have that same, at least have the same ability or same resources to try and make it and become big.
Well, and like you said, pay for what you use type of
Yeah.
a thing. I mean, I
Mm-hmm,
like
mm-hmm,
that idea. Okay. Okay. So as you look at this, though, I am curious because you hinted at this when we met last time. And I'm actually really curious because as we talked about telecom, we look at some technologies and there's been ups and downs, or really kind of flat. Then all of a sudden it boomed.
mm-hmm.
And you hinted that telecom has been relatively stable in terms of
Mm-hmm.
change and disruption. But you hinted at the fact that it's either we're coming into an age where that's not the case, or it's going to be
Yeah.
very much in the near term where we're coming into an age of disruption around telecom and communications.
Yeah, so last time we saw a big disruption was when VoIP came out in the early 2000s,
Okay.
and all of a sudden things were not just digital anymore, but they were online. It was over the internet now, and that obviously opened up a lot of opportunities. But what we're seeing right now is two major things that are happening that is just changing everything. One is, of course, AI. Can't neglect that. But there's a whole user preference, consumer preference change, a shift. And I don't think telecom is going to be around forever in the way that it is today. There's, of course, some advantages that you have right now of having a phone number is that it's universal. You have a number and
It's like a
everyone wants to call
thumbprint
about it.
almost.
It is, right? And there's some convenience in that, I would almost say. But that's almost where it stops, because right now businesses really need to adapt to where their users or their customers are communicating, where they want to reach you.
Yeah.
Like you as I mean, we saw it with first, there was food being delivered. Consumers want to have their favorite food delivered at home whenever they want it. So there were these online portals for that. And then came groceries, especially during COVID. But now things are just changing to where everyone wants to just talk to their vendors with whatever method they prefer. So
Yeah.
I personally like to speak to my friends on Instagram, DMs, and Facebook with my dad in Denmark because that's all he can figure out how to use. But that's that's a preference thing. Everyone has their own preference in terms of where they communicate. Some people like texting, some people like tweeting, emailing, all these different ways, all these different methods. And if you have a business, you need to be able to meet your customers there. I mean, it's that simple. So the days where we just had a phone number and was just a phone company, they're gonna be limited. There's not much left of that. Personally, I can say I was out buying a car, I think, last year or so, and I had test driven one, and I was like pretty much set on that was the one. I went home and to think about it, and I got the business card from the dealership or the dealer there, and I sent him an email saying, hey, what would it cost if I upgrade to the version with the bigger engine? I think that was really what it was. And what would the price difference be? I didn't hear back from him. So the next day I went down to another dealership, another brand that basically had the same car, but just a different brand. And they had it exactly the one I wanted in stock, and I bought it and drove home a couple of hours later. And a month later, I got an email from this dealer. Oh, he missed my email, but am I still interested? No, I'm not. So just because
that was a month ago, buddy.
Yeah, exactly. And just the fact that he didn't reply to my email was the reason why he lost out on a sale. And I had his business card. I could have called him. I had his phone number, but I didn't want to call him. I wanted to send him an email in that moment. That was what I felt like doing.
Well, and it's interesting you bring this up because this is the term I use is we're moving into the age of personalization, which historically has been very not difficult and not scalable, because it was kind of like, well, there's only so much we can do because we can only maintain so many channels and there's only so many things that we can navigate and all of this. But the expectations from consumers is quickly becoming, and I even see this in my own industry, where people are like, listen, I need you to deliver this to me in the way that works best for me. And it's not this, I mean, I guess in some cases it can be kind of this arrogance of like, I want it my way, but it's not necessarily, it's just more, this is the way my life works.
Yeah.
And so you have to meet me where I am,
And the
type of
thing
a
is, there
thing.
are people that will give you that. So if you
Yes,
don't,
that's the
you
thing.
know,
You
yeah,
usually just have to put up with it. And you're like,
yeah,
well, I just know that's not how it works. But now there are people going, well, we can do that.
yeah,
And it's a point of differentiation.
yeah, exactly. I mean, like I said, I went to a different dealership. They had the one I wanted. They answered my questions, and here comes the AI thing, because if the AI had been implemented in or involved in this whole process, I would have received an email back 1 minute later with that
Instantly.
answer. Yeah. So
Yeah.
so that's where that whole thing ties in. So we have this huge change. I don't think telecom is gonna be telecom much more. I mean, yeah, telecom is, if you really boil it down, is communicating, with someone remotely, somewhere
But it
else. So,
used to be
but
limited to a very narrow
yeah,
spectrum of
it's not
what
gonna
it
be a
was.
telephone.
It's not going to be a telephone or a single channel of communication. It's more going to be what are the ways that we interact on an
Hmm.
interpersonal level, regardless of what those channels are.
Yeah, and that's really difficult for most businesses, because how do you do that? Like, how are you available everywhere, and how do you even manage that? And that's kind of like where it's really interesting for me now, because there's something new to build, you know. So Telzio, it becomes all of a sudden this whole new endeavor with, everything is changing again, and now we need to either adapt or fall behind.
Okay. So this one's really interesting to me because I'm curious, as you're looking at some of these, I can see where this would be overwhelming for businesses. And this might be one of
Mhm.
those areas where people just go, and I can hear the conversations now where people just go, that's ridiculous. People can't expect, maybe I'm channeling my dad on this one, right? In his local business up in northern Minnesota, going, that's just ridiculous to expect that people would expect me to respond to them from whichever way. If they want to talk to me, they can call the office or they can send me an email. And it's like,
That's fine.
okay, you can hold on to that, but how much of the market are you missing? And especially as
Right.
this next generation comes up, I mean, I just even think of myself. We're close in age. Don't call me. My voicemail literally says,
Uh-huh.
I do not listen to this. If you
Yeah.
leave a voicemail, I will not call you back. You might as well delete this and hang up and email or text me. Like, I'm not going to respond. And again, is everybody that way? No. But I can tell you right now, if somebody's trying to get a hold of me and they think I'll just keep calling Christopher and eventually I'll get a hold of him,
No,
you
I'm the
won't.
same way, and I'm a freaking CEO of a phone service provider, and I don't like talking
The
on the phone.
CEO of a phone company goes, don't you dare call me because I won't ever answer.
Yeah, but it's so stereotypical, and it is, of course, it's a generation thing. But just imagine what the next generation is going to be like. The ones that are coming out on the market now, like that. Yeah, things are changing.
So as you look at this from the vantage point you're looking at, because obviously, and I think this is a really important thing for people who think and listen to this, because it goes back to the conversation we've been having all along, which is you can see change ahead of you that is inevitable. It's coming.
Hmm.
And
Yep.
you can either sit there and go, like, I'm just
Yeah.
going to cross my arms and I'm going to sit here, and you're going to get kicked in the teeth, like as it bowls right over you. So you, in some ways, are in that situation where you go, the way of telecom as we know it,
Hmm.
probably in the next few years is going to look nothing like it does today.
Yeah.
How do you lean into that then? And like, how do you think about that to go, all right, well, it's fine. We're going to adapt.
Yeah. I mean, um, I, 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 I just can't help adapting. It's very natural to me to want to explore the new things. So I feel like that's just where our company naturally is going. We started
So
just a registry.
is that part of what you're looking at then as a business saying, okay, that
Oh yeah,
is coming. So what do we do about that?
yeah,
How do
of
we
course, of course.
start focusing on integrated messaging, integrated
Yeah,
communication?
yeah. I mean, we have a new version of our platform coming out soon, and it's gonna have a lot of those things that we just talked about. And it is really just a natural next step for our businesses. Yeah, we are a phone service provider, and we will also still provide phone service, but you're going to be able to have a platform where you can log in and you can communicate with your customers, but you don't have to worry about how you communicate with your customers or how they communicate with you. You know, if you get a text message and you just reply to that text message, or you let the AI do it, but you know, yeah, maybe there will be a little icon in the corner that says it's an Instagram DM or it's a tweet, but you don't really have to think about that. You really just have to think about giving a good service to your customers.
Yeah.
And
You just
running a
have to
business.
think, this message came to me. This person is asking a question. I need to get them that information. I'm going to let the technology on the back end figure out the best way to get it to them.
Exactly. And then one of the things that are really fascinating to me and interesting, you know, at the moment is figuring out how do we then correlate these communication forms, because yeah, you might like tweeting and that might be your favorite method of communications, but what if you email someone the next day? How do they know that you're the same person that tweeted at you? And solving that puzzle is something that we've been working on. That's fun.
To try and connect the digital footprint of people's technology stack. Yeah, well, and I think the age, you know, I've talked a lot recently in some of my YouTube videos about the fact that, you know, we are moving into an age of distrust. I think as people start to question everything.
Everything, yeah.
At literally every, I saw a video of you, but was it really you? Was that actually your voice? Did you actually say those things? Did that conversation really happen? Type of a thing is going to lead to people just wondering everything. So I'm sure then that for you leaves the question of, well, so how do we make sure we validate and authenticate all those things so we connect all the dots?
Yeah, and how do we keep it private at the same time? Because just because I give you my phone number, I don't want necessarily you to know my social security number and my home address and everything else about me.
Well, and I may want you to know, I may want you to know how to connect with me on LinkedIn, but I might not want you to know how to connect with me on Facebook.
Yeah, and I, at the same time, I also do want you to know that I'm the same person when I send you an email the next day or send you or call you, right? So how do you do that? I think that's really fascinating. And how do you at the same time keep that private? Because just because I sent you an email, you know, I want you to know that I'm the same person, but I don't want to give you everything else at the same time. Or maybe I do want to give you something. Maybe, you know, I have Amazon as a subscription and I move to another address or I get a new email address. Maybe I do want them to know that without me having to tell them that, because I have a lot of different vendors that I use, right? And that's annoying to have to update them, and I forget some always, you know. So how do we do all that?
Okay. Well, sounds like we haven't quite hacked that code yet, but it's definitely on the horizon, and one that, well, maybe you have and you just can't say it yet because you have.
I can't talk too much about it.
All right. All right. Well, then we'll have to have a follow-up conversation in the future where we can talk about this, because again, I think even just what you described, it would be easy to listen to that. And yes, could that be something that's fearful because it's different? You're afraid of what that might mean, but it also can be wonderful in that, like you said, how great would it be to be able to do something and have everything know how to get in touch and communicate and push all this to you at the right time, on the right channels, before you even have to know that you've let anybody know what's happening.
Yeah, exactly. And you know, it goes so much further than that. It's also your friends and family. You want to share certain things with them across different platforms, because again, yeah, there might be one big Apple company out there that's you know, has almost a monopoly on devices, but at the same time, there are people using other devices and other services, and that, I think that's going to become more spread out, like we talked about earlier. With communications, I think this goes beyond that. It's everything is becoming personalized, and there's so many good options out there, so many good alternatives. And if you can solve this thing where people can communicate across those platforms and not have to worry about what the other person is using, so everyone can use whatever they want, and not have to give each other all that information every time I change my service, like change my preference. Maybe there's a new service I want to use, right? Being able to correlate that and update everyone about it without having to update them about it, kind of subscribing to it, right? That's I think is a fascinating thing to solve.
just a big old follow me button, right? Just that's it. It's just a follow me. I mean, in many ways, I think about this as a content creator. As a content creator, it's I very much think of it that way, where it's like, if there are people who are wanting to follow, again, not just follow, but like they have a reason to be in communication with you, whatever that may be. They don't have to know the right pathway to get through to actually be able to do that. I think that's a huge problem in the world that's only gotten more complicated as more technology is spun up and all these other things have happened. And so if you're on the process of solving that, that's an important problem for your creative mind to solve.
Yeah, I think so, and I've spent a lot of time on it. I think we're on the right path, and it's yeah, it is fascinating to me. It's definitely the next step in the way I see communications happening, like just in general on a very
Yep.
very high level plan. Yeah.
I love it. Well, I actually am, speaking of just getting started, I feel like I'm just getting started on this conversation, but I need to wrap it up because I did commit that I would be done by 4 my time. So I thank you so much, Peter, for making the time. And I think this should be encouraging for folks who may be looking at the future and wondering what are some of the things that I can expect as we go forward, but also maybe looking at it with a fearful eye or wondering, well, I don't know how I feel about that. And that's okay.
Yeah.
But I think there's a better path forward.
Yeah. And again, allow yourself to be, you know, emotional or whatever you would call it about certain things whenever it's happening. It's not. I'm not saying you shouldn't.
No,
But
exactly.
but once you've done with that, then figure out what is the best step that I can take from here. There's always one.
Yes, completely agree. And I think that's a great note to close on, which is really, yeah, you don't need to deny that emotional grieving process, but you do have to get back up and move forward.
Yeah, exactly.
All right. Well, thank you so much, Peter. Thanks everybody for listening and watching wherever you consume it. Again, my goal has been to communicate this out to whichever channels work best for everybody. So thank you all. And we will be back next week, whatever week, whenever I get this published, there will be content surrounding it at some point. So thanks everybody and have a great one.